This is the IBJ Podcast for the week of January 6th, 2025, brought to you by Taft. I'm Lesley Weidenbener, editor of IBJ, in this week for Mason King. 2024 was a big year for entertainment in Indianapolis. Taylor Swift came to town for 3 concerts, of course, but major sports events, including NBA All-Star Weekend, the U.S. Swimming Trials, and Indianapolis 500, included multiple concerts and arts events as well. Even celebrations around the eclipse featured music and the arts. So will 2025 be a letdown? I sat down with IBJ Arts and Entertainment reporter Dave Lindquist to find out what's on the docket this year in entertainment. Here's our conversation. I'm here with Dave Lindquist, the Arts and Entertainment reporter here at IBJ. Dave, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Leslie. Happy 2025.
Happy 2025. And we're going to talk about 2025, but I don't want to get going too quickly on that without first doing a quick review of 2024. I think you told me it was going to be a tough year to beat.
That's right. Yes. Any entertainment that happens in 2025 has a tough act to follow, because in 2024, you couldn't have missed some of the huge events that happened in town. Taylor Swift played 3 sold-out shows at Lucas Oil Stadium. We hosted the NBA All-Star Game. Indianapolis was the site of the Olympic swim trials. Just by luck, we also were in the path of totality for the solar eclipse. You know, obviously Taylor, that's a concert, but these other events were ensconced in entertainment as well. So lots of big things.
Dave, how new is that idea that every time there's some tourism-related event, it also comes with a lot of music and arts?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Just generally thinking, I mean, I moved to Indianapolis in 1998, and the weekend of the Indianapolis 500, there was a Carb Day concert, but Carb Day was on a Thursday, not on a Friday. And the Carb Day concert on that Thursday was on like just a makeshift stage in the Pagoda Plaza. And they would get bands that were not anywhere near an A-list. And over the years, Indianapolis 500 weekend is now a music festival. They have the kind of classic rock show on Carb Day. They have the big country show on Saturday, and they have the big electronic dance music show during the race. I think another eye-opening format, I think, has been how the NCAA has handled Final Four weekends. Just through the years, here in Indianapolis, we've seen Rihanna play a free show tied to Final Four. John Mellencamp played a free show on Monument Circle because of the Final Four. So
during college football week, and Doja Cat was here.
That's also true. A very chilly night on the Circle.
Yes.
Yeah, I think organizers want to maximize not only attracting people, but helping the people who are in attendance get the most for their time they're going to spend in a city.
Sure. It also can change perceptions of Indianapolis, I think, a little bit. And you've certainly seen, in addition to concerts, which feel like a relatively easy addition, you're also seeing just a lot of arts in general, more murals, more fine arts associated with a lot of these events, which has been super fascinating.
The swim trials commissioned specific art, and that put a spotlight on Indianapolis artists, which we're always glad to see. They did a cool program of customized auto racing helmets that, you know, no other city is probably going to do that.
And then during the NBA All-Star Game, they did basketballs from across the custom basketballs featuring local artists.
Yeah, those were large public art pieces, and I would actually like to see where some of those sculptures ended up.
I agree. There are actually a couple that I think are still over by Gainbridge Fieldhouse. I think you can still see a couple of those. But a part of the reason that arts has become a bigger part of some of these events is thanks to an organization called Gang Gang. That's Molly and Alan Bacon. They made IBJ's Newsmaker of the Year list. They've been involved in a lot of these things. Just a quick overview of some of the things Gang Gang did in 2024.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. During NBA All-Star weekend, they presented a special edition of their Butter Fine Art Fair, that was in the Indianapolis Arts Garden. They also helped activate some empty storefronts along Washington Street with either businesses or art presentations or concerts in the basement of the Old Rock Bottom Brewery. That's what that was.
Yeah,
right?
Old Rock Bottom Brewery.
And that actually was a mini version of the Treese Hip Hop Festival. So yeah, and their history, also related to sports, goes back to when Indianapolis presented every game of the 2021 NCAA men's basketball tournament. They were, involved in the programming of hundreds of outdoor free performances.
All right, well, let's look ahead to 2025. I actually want to start with a weekend that you describe as an epic summer weekend. And I should mention that in this week's issue of IBJ, you have top 10 things to look forward to in the arts and entertainment world in 2025. The epic summer weekend is on the list. What is that, and why have you labeled it that?
Okay, so coming off of our hosting of the NBA All-Star Game, certainly a big story during the summer of 2024, and it just keeps rolling, is the new attention surrounding the Indiana Fever and Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston and Kelsey Mitchell, that great squad. They say that the WNBA says that they had a city that dropped out or something, but lo and behold, Indianapolis is hosting the 2025 WNBA All-Star Game, and this is in mid-July. July 18-19 is when the All-Star Weekend festivities are happening. Now, every year in July, Indiana Black Expo presents its summer celebration, which is many things, but part of it is an entertainment component. And they traditionally have a big outdoor concert, some big indoor concerts. When I first saw that these weekends were coinciding, these events were all happening in this same July weekend, I kind of felt like, maybe that's not so great for one or the other event. But then I have talked to some people, and I kind of agree with them that it's kind of like, well, it's not one that's going to detract from the other. It's going to be a super Megatron type of joining of things, and I can't tell you what's going to be happening in terms of names or specific events, but I bet there's going to be a lot of cool music that weekend.
Do you know whether there is any coordination between the organizations at this point?
I do not.
So the Indiana Pacers Sports and Entertainment, which own the Fever, they are coordinating a lot of the WNBA work. How do you expect the WNBA All-Star Weekend to be compared to NBA All-Star Weekend?
That's an excellent question. Indianapolis has never hosted a WNBA All-Star game. And before February of 2024, I don't think we had an NBA All-Star game in
30 years or something.
At least, yeah. Yeah, it should be pretty interesting. And of course, we see that it's just a big roller coaster ride in one direction for women's sports in general.
I think that's what will be fascinating is traditionally, I think the WNBA All-Star Weekend has been a smaller affair. Not quite as much attention, but, this last year, and part of it was, I think, it was because it was an Olympic year, but This last year it got a lot of attention. And I think the Pacers, you got Mel Raines, a new CEO of Pacers Sports and Entertainment. I think she will do everything she can to blow it out and make it like no other WNBA All-Star Weekend before.
Okay, I will say this. Phoenix was the site last year, and it was a special game because it wasn't an Eastern Conference versus Western Conference or even the best players in the league pick teams. It wasn't that format for the game. It was the Olympic team versus a WNBA All-Star.
Basically, the best players in the league who didn't make the All-Star team.
And we recall that
Caitlin Clark
and Aaliyah and Kelsey were on that non-Olympic team, and they whooped the Olympic
team. They did. It was fun to watch.
And I will say that at that particular game, the halftime entertainment was Pitbull, and the Star Spangled Banner was performed by country music artist Cody Johnson. I will make a friendly wager with you that what we get in Indianapolis will be more star-studded and better than what that was.
Why would I take that bet? I think
let's agree.
any listener who wants to take that bet should email Dave Lindquist because I am not taking it.
And last year's Summer Celebration outdoor concert was a pretty good lineup in itself. It was Johnny Gill, Layla Hathaway, Morris Day and the Time, Atlantic Star, and Karen White. I think that when Indiana Black Expo is scheduling this year and they're talking to artists who might want to come, I'm guessing they probably will say, we're going to have a lot of people in town because of the WNBA All-Star Game. So that might attract some bigger names also.
Let's take a break to hear from our sponsor. This is the IBJ Podcast.
Taft, today's modern law firm. With more than 800 attorneys in 8 primary Midwest markets and the District of Columbia, we provide solutions to the business issues facing middle market and emerging companies alike. We do this through a highly collaborative and inclusive team approach. Taft, the modern law firm. To learn more, visit taftlaw.com.
Welcome back to the IBJ Podcast. We're talking with Dave Lindquist about some can't-miss arts and entertainment options for 2025. So there's going to be a lot of music next year, but I do want to kind of switch gears and talk about something totally different. John Green, celebrated author from Indianapolis, has a new book coming out, and it's not the kind of book that most people would expect from him. So tell us about the book and what motivated it.
Yes, John Green, based in Indianapolis. John was born in Indianapolis in 1977, I think, and his family moved within like months of his birth. He grew up in Orlando, Florida, went to high school in Alabama, went to college at Kenyon College in Ohio, lived in Chicago, lived in New York, made it back to Indianapolis because his wife, Sarah, was hired as a curator at the Indianapolis Museum of Art. So I'm just saying this because sometimes people say, is John Green really a native here? And he technically is.
He was actually born a native, here, right?
And it's just a great coincidence that we have had him back in the city, and his career has grown thanks to young adult fiction books such as The Fault in Our Stars and Turtles All the Way Down. But he made a transition 3 or 4 years ago when he wrote his first nonfiction book, which is called The Anthropocene Reviewed, which were short essays that reviewed things on a 5-star scale. That book actually was an outgrowth of a podcast he had done, and I would encourage anybody to seek out this book because in addition to how informative and entertaining all those essays are, it really serves as a memoir for John.
Interesting.
I think he is aware that that's what he was doing. Like a lot of his life is kind of threaded through that book. But up next is a book that comes out on March 18th that I think will really be seen as a curveball to a lot of people. This book is titled Everything is Tuberculosis: The History and Persistence of Our Deadliest Infection.
Yeah, not what you would expect from our young adult author.
Right. How does John Green become interested in tuberculosis? It captured his attention during a 2019 visit to a hospital in Africa. For several years, John and his brother Hank Green have supported efforts to improve maternal health in Sierra Leone, Africa. On one of these visits in 2019, John met a young man who was diagnosed with multi-drug resistant tuberculosis. And if you know anything about John, once he gets interested in something, it's a very deep and wide dive. Not to speak for him, but I've spoken with him about this a few times.
And you did a story, if people want to look it up earlier,
yeah, that was
last year.
Probably last January, 2024. He's very frustrated that tuberculosis is a thing that, in the United States, nobody even gives a passing thought to because we made the effort to eradicate it. And in other parts of the world, for whatever reasons, and they're not always hard to guess, those efforts haven't been made, and it's a disease that continues to take many, many lives every year.
And the book explores a lot of those reasons, a lot of the issues.
It's a nonfiction book. If I'm correct, he tells the story of this young man in Africa who's named Henry. And John says that one of the reasons that Henry captured his attention is because John's son is named Henry. This Henry, I think, is a teenager now. But I think, so that's part of the story. And then it's a very nonfiction look at this issue.
What other books are we expecting to come out in 2025?
So one of my favorite books of recent years was the debut novel by Ashley Flowers, who people know as the host of the Crime Junkie podcast. This is based in Indianapolis. She wrote a book called All Good People Here, which was a mystery set in Indiana. And the way that book ended, I thought her second book was going to be a sequel to that story. I was wrong. But she does have a second mystery novel coming out on May 6th called The Missing Half. And also, people can catch Ashley in person because she's kicking off a Crime Junkie national tour March 6th at Fisher's Event Center. And I'll also say that the book I'm reading right now is an amazing book by Kaveh Akbar. Kaveh went to college at Purdue and to Butler, and he's a very high-profile poet in the United States, but his debut novel came out in 2024 called Martyr. That's the one I'm reading right now. And he's bringing his book tour to Indiana Landmarks on January 28th.
Nice. Yeah, so that's not something we normally pay a lot of attention to, or books, but I'm really glad you were able to bring those up, and I'm glad we have one on the list.
Thank you.
Let's talk about the local debut of Broadway's Six. That is happening in March. Tell us about Six.
I can't say I'm a Six expert, but it's a musical that reimagines the six wives of Henry VIII as pop singers. And this is a show that's never been here before. I just thought that was a nice thing to include on our list.
I got to say, I saw the pictures that they gave us with it, and it looks fantastic. When you hear Henry VIII, I know you said reimagined, but you have to, when I saw the images, I was like, no, this is very modern. It feels very modern.
Yeah, it's like a mashup of then and now, I would say. And after I filed this top 10 list, we learned that Clues Hall is going to get a big glow up in 2025. So the show 6 is going to be presented March 4 through 9 at Clues on the campus of Butler University. That joint is going to be closed June through October while they basically reinforce the stage that's been there, I think, since it's the same stage from 1963 when the place opened. They're going to reinforce rigging points above the stage. Because that's one of the things that we have these beautiful halls, and they were built then, but production, as time goes on, changes and evolves.
And gets bigger.
Yeah.
It gets so much bigger,
heavier.
So much more equipment.
Right. So Clues Hall and the Murrah Theater at Old National Center are our two Broadway and Indianapolis sites. So to keep those Broadway shows on tour coming to Clues, they're going to do these renovations. They're going to add more loading docks behind the
facility there.
Yep. And one of the things that I'm super intrigued by, so I love Clues Hall because it's a magnificent example of brutalist architecture. And when you go in there, along the sides of the theater are these terraced box seats, right? That's fine, but if you're in there, and if your seat, all the seats are loose in these areas. So you get a seat and you can kind of move around. But it's a flat surface. So if you're not one of the seats that's at front, if you're in the second or third row, you're not really seeing all the stage that you can. You're basically looking at the back of somebody's head.
And so you're saying if you're in one of these side boxes and you're sitting a couple rows back, you're looking through people.
Yeah. So one of the things they're going to do with the renovations is that they're going to turn those into tiered fixed seating. So kind of like, a rake, a slope of seating. So it'll be better for people who aren't in that front row.
That's cool. That's a really interesting change. They're also adding on to Clues Hall. Is that right?
So I think that's construction that's going to happen in 2026. So like I said, Clues Hall has been there since 1963. And about a decade or so ago, they added a new venue next door called the Schrott Center for the Arts. and it's a smaller venue with, fixed seating. What's coming up next is going to be a 1,200 capacity room that's going to touch both Clues Hall and Schrott. So it's all going to be one big 3 connected building. And this new spot is going to be more of a general admission standing concert venue, kind of akin to the Vogue, or if you're familiar with the Hi-Fi. Honestly, I'm pretty excited for students at Butler to have that kind of facility also on campus, because I think they're probably going to see more up-and-coming, youthful...
More shows that a college kid is probably interested in.
Bingo.
Yeah. Actually, that is one of a number of new venues that are on the docket coming up. Maybe not all in 2025 or 2026, but planned.
We're in the middle of a wave of concert venues. Some have already opened. The Fisher's Event Center that I mentioned, where the Crime Junkie Tour is going to be. The Simons and Live Nation are talking about a pretty big indoor venue that's going to be next door to Gainbridge Fieldhouse. I don't know a lot about how that's developing, but it seems like it's still on course. The folks who run the Hi-Fi are going to turn the outdoor Hi-Fi annex into an indoor venue, also in the Murphy Building down in Fountain Square. The Vogue just opened their new baby next door venue called Turntable.
IU Indianapolis is going to build a new arena that I'm sure will be able to have some shows there as well. I think Noblesville also has plans for a sports facility, but I'm sure it will be able to be used for other things as well.
Right, that's the home of the Mad Ants.
And in 2024, didn't we have an opening of a new facility in Plainfield?
Oh, of course. Hendrix Live, great room.
Yeah,
so it's interesting.
There's big stuff happening. Do you have any concern that all of these facilities will be able to land artists to fill them?
I do have some concerns, Lesley. The best hope is that everyone will find a niche that connects with audiences, and hopefully audiences will find the price is right for these types of things. But we could seg into one of our top 10 items, number 6, which is not a music venue 100%, but it is a place where performances are going to happen.
Great.
The owners of Indie CD and Vinyl on Broad Ripple Avenue are going to add a neighboring gathering space when they expand into the old Land Sharks nightclub space. So through the years, Indie CD and Vinyl has had this great stage at the back of the room. They did in-stores, and in addition to a lot of Indianapolis artists, one day they had Mumford & Sons. Trust me, they used to be big.
Absolutely.
They're not super big right now. But that day was like kind of mind-blowing that...
No, that's amazing.
Yeah, I was lucky to be in the room that day. It was the same day they then played a show at Gainbridge Fieldhouse that night.
Wow.
So, but when the pandemic arrived, in-stores obviously were not happening. So they moved some pinball machines to the back of the room. The owners, Andy and Annie Skinner, talk about inventory is kind of like taken over the entire record store. So they're going to knock through the wall into the old Land Shark space, which is right next door. Actually, when Indie CD and Vinyl opened, that was Indie CD and Vinyl.
Oh, interesting.
They moved next door, and now they're reclaiming their original spot in a way. So this new spot is going to have a stage for performances. It's also going to have like a coffee shop service area. They call it a neighborhood gathering spot, or a third space is a popular term. And they talk about say your family's going to go shop for records, and maybe not everybody in the family is into the shopping for the records as everybody else. So maybe while one member of the family is shopping for records, the other two might be hanging out over in this other room. Like I said, while it's not a music venue, there are going to be nights when, instead of going through the Indie CD and Vinyl record store entrance and then going over to the other room, they are going to have a front door where there are going to be occasionally all ages shows just, specifically there.
Yeah, and I know that you're a big proponent of more all ages shows in Indianapolis as a way to sort of expand the music scene.
Yes, I think the last time I was on the IBJ podcast, yes, we were evangelicizing with the owners of the Hi-Fi about that.
So one other thing that I wanted to make sure we mentioned, was the giant tortoises at the zoo.
One of my favorite days in 2024 was when I went to the zoo and reported on the new chimpanzees exhibit. And so when I see that in May they're going to bring in two of the world's largest tortoise species, Galapagos and Aldabra tortoises, I'm in.
I got to say, I'm actually more excited about the tortoises than I was the chimps.
There you go.
Even though the chimps are cool. So I think this is really going to be fun.
These are the reptiles that can live for more than 150 years, and they measure up to 4 feet long.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So, well, that's exciting for the zoo.
Old school tortoises.
That's funny. What else? We weren't going to go through the whole list, but was there anything else on this list of things coming up for 2025 you wanted to make sure to mention?
I think it's going to be amazing when the new Contemporary Art Museum opens on the Big Car Collaborative campus in Garfield Park, because in addition to 5 exhibition spaces for modern art, they're going to have a cafe, a commercial kitchen, 5 business incubator storefronts, 2 audio recording studios, 20 studios for visual artists, and wait for it, a performance space where you're going to be able to see concerts. So one more spot.
So that's near Garfield Park. That happens to be my neighborhood, so I know a little bit about it. But that campus there, started out as something sort of small, and this is going to be an enormous addition there.
I talked to Jim Walker and Chate Marsh, who run Big Car Collaborative. It's almost a thing where when you see this 40,000 square foot idea that's going to open there, it's almost like, oh, now I'm going to rewind and I see your vision all the way. Like, this is what you were pointing to. And they've done great things along the way. Their Tube Factory spot does some of the things that this new spot's going to do. Of course, they've done the radio station and all the artist residences on the block.
Co-owning with artists.
But when they get everything up and running, I think it's the realized vision. Maybe 2025 does have a shot to equal 2024.
Well, I suspect that we will have you back on the podcast during 2025, and you can give us an update on all these things.
Don't forget, also promised in 2025 is the final Stranger Things season.
Oh, yeah, we don't want to forget that. And we don't want to forget to mention that you have a weekly email called After Hours.
That's right.
Sign up at IBJ.com and get your weekly dose of all of this kind of news. And then tell us about your radio show.
Oh, Monday nights at 7 p.m. I host The Beat with Dave Lindquist on radio station 92.3 WTTS. You can tune in via conventional radio, stream it at WTTSFM.com, or through your smart speaker of choice.
Excellent. Dave, we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks to Dave for that conversation about the arts in 2025. You can read about those events in more detail in this week's IBJ. You can also read a story from IBJ City Government reporter Taylor Wooten about the Hogshead administration's decision to postpone the implementation of universal curbside recycling until 2028. That's 3 years later than the goal the city originally set. You can find those stories as well as new reports about the LEAP District and construction planned for US 37 at IBJ.com. Thanks again for listening to the IBJ Podcast. Mason King will be back next week.